How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Blade Bias, and welcome to my couch. I'm sure you've heard Ethan's various talks about the Nautilus and his experience with the Nautilus, and how poorly his experience went with just the tuning, and he got it tuned, or it arrived, had blade rub, sent it back to Squid, got it retuned, arrived, got blade rub again. Just overall very, very disappointing. But me, on the other hand, I've had not too far off of an experience with the Nautilus, because the Nautilus, I think, inherently, just due to its design, is going to have tolerance issues. The hardware is just very small. It's just very tightly compacted together. So the Nautilus just will have tuning issues. That seems to be a common and very frequent occurrence with the Nautilus, which is something to be very aware of if you plan to buy one. But the Nautilus, for me, was never something that I was like, it was never something I held in a very high standard, which is, I think, why Ethan was so disappointed by his. Was because the fact, drink water, everybody, it's important, was the fact that he held the Nautilus as like his grail, his trainer grail for the longest time. And then he got it, and it was just disappointment. But for me, the Nautilus was something I just took interest in because of the specs and because of how light it is, really. And so I've had a few knots. I've had, well, I should say a few, but I've only ever had one other knot. And I got it at a time where I was very, very deep in the Balisong review space. And I was just trying everything I could possibly get my hands on. So by the time I got my Nautilus, I had already gotten a bunch of other things that were just more interesting, and also that was at the time I had my Prisma, which was my sweet baby boy. Prisma is still like a very, very amazing knife, but especially at that time, right after Blade Show, Prisma was all I cared about. I did not give a single shit about any other knife on the market. So the Prisma was just everything for me, especially because I had a custom one that Dalen made for me. It was absolutely the pinnacle of my collection for me. So the Nautilus ended up just kind of falling into the background, and I didn't really touch it anymore. So I sold it. But a few days before I sold it, I started flipping it again, you know, just to make sure everything was alright, everything was good. Just to make sure everything functioned as properly intended. And I distinctly remember picking it up and saying, wait a second, this is actually kind of sick. I'm not sure if I want to sell this. But the guy had already paid me. The time had already come for me to ship it out. So I didn't really have much of a choice. I'm not one to back out on deals like that, so, you know, I was going to honor my word. Definitely should have gotten water before I started recording. Anyways, so I was going to honor my word, right? I'm not going to be the guy to back out on a trade like that. So, I sold the Nautilus. I didn't think much of it. But over time, my preferences have slowly drifted back towards what the Nautilus is. And the two main things there are the fact that it is a strong handle bias, which I very much am beginning, well, not beginning, but ever since I got my Kraken trainer, I have just fallen deeply in love with strongly handle biased knives. It has become my favorite balance. However, I only like a strong handle bias if it is on very light knives or trainers, which is why the Kraken trainer works for me and why the Nautilus works so well for me. When you have a strongly handle biased knife on a heavy and kind of clunky trainer, to me that just feels bad. It just feels slow, and it just feels bulky and annoying. It just feels like it's going to just fly out of my hands, and it just hurts to flip because I have been developing pain in my wrists and in my thumb because of how much I used to flip. I've slowed down now, and the Nautilus is helping with this, which we will get to in a second, but I cannot flip heavy things because it's just uncomfortable and it makes my hands sore, and it's just not enjoyable to me. So, super light knives with a strong handle bias. Of course, that is exactly what the Nautilus is. And that was something that is appealing to me because I am beginning to flip more casually. You know, I'm not really taking ballast songs as like, this is my entire life, I need to do this every waking moment of the day. I was that way for a while, but I'm not really like that anymore, and now I'm more on the kind of just like, this is a thing I do in my spare time kind of deal. And a good reason for that was my hands were starting to hurt a lot, and that on top of working was just like, my hands were getting worn out, and it just was not comfortable anymore. So I had to stop, I had to slow down. But, you know, I like plastic ballast songs. I know some of you might be thinking, like, okay, why doesn't he just flip plastic ballast songs? I like them, but I don't quite like them enough to make them, like, my main ballast song. I don't know. Something about just plastic ballast songs feels a little odd to me in a lot of scenarios. It just doesn't feel quite right. Just doesn't feel quite as sturdy and quite as durable. I don't quite trust it as much. And also just like the sound. There's a very distinct sound that metal ballast songs have that plastic ballast songs do not have. Actually, it's kind of the other way around. There's a very distinct, like, just sound and feel that plastic ballast songs have that I really enjoy for what they are, but I would not really EDC them. I don't know. It's a mental thing. It's kind of goofy, and everyone's a little different. I know Ethan EDCs his edit light all the time, but it really is just a personal preference thing. But with the Nautilus, I've noticed after flipping it for a little, first of all, it took me a couple minutes when I got it out of the box. I did trade this. This is not fresh from the factory. Thank you to Shezmu, or Miles. Huge shout out to Miles for trading this for my swordfish. Wild trade, because my swordfish is a little bit beat up, and this thing arrived in basically perfect condition. That was crazy. But huge thank you to Miles. That was an amazing trade. Excuse me. But when I got it out of the box, it took me a little bit to get used to, you know, the very, very strong handle bias and the light nature of it. It took me a second to get back into it, but now that I have gotten back into it, this thing has almost like reignited my desire to learn new tricks and my desire to get better at flipping, because this is such an effortless and easy experience for me that I don't have in a single other ballast song. The only thing that's close enough to that would be probably the Mako in terms of familiarity, because I've spent so long with the Mako. I feel like I can do a lot of tricks without really worrying about it. But the Cygnus really is the only other one that gives me this level of just ease of use. But of course, I like the strong handle bias of the Nautilus a little bit more than I like the balance of the Cygnus. But this offers just an ease of flipping that's just easy on my hands. It's easy for me to perform tricks because it's the balance I like the most. And it's just so light that I barely even have to think about what I'm doing, which is exactly what I want. At this point in my flipping journey, I don't want to sit there and focus all my effort into flipping. I want to just casually flip while I'm watching a YouTube video, or like while I'm outside just waiting for something, or just, you know, just have something in my hands to fidget with. And the Nautilus is really, really good for that. Especially with the extra strong handle bias. It just makes it so everything I do just flows. And I don't really have to force it. I don't really have to do anything. I don't have to give it any gas. For my style specifically, it just works so well. And that is incredibly important for me. And that is the reason I have been enjoying the Nautilus so much as of recently. The Nautilus is... Somebody messaged me on Instagram and asked if they should get a Nautilus for their first knife. Oh, I should probably mention, first of all, the V2. There's not too much of a difference between the V1 and the V2. Just going to throw it out there. Just some hardware upgrades, and that's really it. The jimping is pretty decent. I suck at ladders on this thing. The jimping is pretty decent. It's a little goofy that it doesn't involve the G10 as well. It kind of makes it, like, weirdly ineffective because your hands kind of touch the G10 instead of touching this flat face right here. It's weird. It's goofy, but it is better than nothing. And I think the only way to do jimping properly on the Nautilus is to include the G10 as well. But that would make it so you cannot interchange the scales between a V1 and a V2 properly, which is kind of weird, and yeah, whatever. It is what it is. I would have liked to see it included in the G10, but, you know, whatever. The Nautilus, somebody asked me on Instagram if they should get a Nautilus for their first, like, good metal balisong trader. My answer to that question is no, probably not, because the Nautilus has such a distinct feel to it that you don't really get from any other knife that I can think of. So, in terms of getting the Nautilus as one of your first balisongs, I really wouldn't recommend it because you're gonna get used to something that there's not really much else of. If you're thinking about getting your first metal balisong, I think now that the Kraken Trainer V3 is out, that is my uncontested recommendation. I think for the availability and the performance that the Kraken Trainer V3 offers, there's really no beating it. The only thing is if you don't have the money for it, which is understandable. But if you have the money, if you have 200 something bucks to spend on a good balisong, Kraken Trainer V3, there's really no better option for most people. Most people. Not everyone, but for most people. So yeah, I wouldn't really recommend the Nautilus as a first knife. However, the Nautilus is definitely something that if you like stuff like this, you will probably enjoy the Nautilus a lot. And I think there is a very solid reason why you see the Nautilus so commonly in a lot of high-end flippers, especially over in the Asian countries, especially like Korean flippers use the Nautilus a lot, and that is because the flow that it offers lends itself very well to tricks like that. With the lightweight and flowy nature of it, it lends itself very, very well to that style of flipping. So, the Nautilus, not for everybody. The Nautilus does still have some tolerance issues, and in terms of it feeling like it's worth the price. I know it's another thing a lot of people have issues with. One, the tolerance is not just kind of has tolerance issues, it's just kind of the way it's designed. Not a deal breaker for a lot of people, but for some people, tolerances are the absolute end of the world, so complain if you want to. But the price of the Nautilus is where the actual discrepancy lies. And the price of the Nautilus is fine. From a design standpoint and from a business standpoint, the price of the Nautilus makes sense because this is a very complicated design. There's a lot of pieces layered on top of each other. There's a lot of things that have to go right to make a good Nautilus. From a consumer standpoint, though, I can see where this would be the issue because tang pins, not a lot of people like him. Me, myself, not a huge fan. But just the way the Nautilus is designed, tang pins are the way it has to be, unfortunately. But tolerance issues, you know, on a $200+ knife could be a little, some people don't like that. The one thing I will say, though, is that Nautiluses, not a lie, do go for pretty cheap on the secondhand market. You can find a decently used Nautilus for sale, like a V1 Nautilus for sale at the price of a squid trainer. And I think at that point, that's a pretty good deal. The price of the Nautilus, the price of everything, is up to personal preference. I would never in a million years, like, I barely understand why people spend over $1,000 on JK design knives, but people do it. Some people think that's a good value. Me personally, I think that's absolutely brain damaged, but some people think that's a good value, and you do with your money whatever the hell you want to. That is not my, like, I can't control you. This, oh geez, this I traded for my swordfish, which I traded for another knife, which was just like, I didn't spend $200+ on this. So of course my opinion is a little skewed there. But my black on black Nautilus that I originally bought, I did spend $200 on. I bought it for $200, and then on top of that I bought the acrylic scales for an extra, I think, $50, $60. And on top of that, did some extra stuff to it. So that Nautilus was pretty expensive. And it really just comes down to the experience. The experience of a Nautilus is very unique. And it is very, very light, very, very effortless, and very, very flowy. And for some people, that alone is worth the price. In the same way, for some people, just the collector's value of something like a JK Designs knife or what is the Gigas, whatever the hell, you know the one. And the collector's value of some knives like that is enough for people to want it. For me, I'm all about the experience. As you can hear, this thing is pretty loose and it is very dry because this is an experience thing. I don't care about the condition, really, of this Nautilus because I got it and it is allowing me to flip very easily, so I'm going to flip it very often wherever I want to and take it with me pretty often. So I am not going to care much about, you know, the tolerances and the perfection and keeping everything perfect and how everything goes with this knife, because that's not why I have it. I have it for the reason of it is fun, and I like fun things, and it allows me to flip easily and effortlessly, and that is what I like. So, yeah. The Nautilus V2, it's not even really about the Nautilus V2. The Nautilus V2 is the same thing as the Nautilus V1, basically. The experience didn't change. It is not a standard Balisong. The Nautilus is definitely unique, and definitely something you should, you know, try before you buy. But there is definitely a good reason why a lot of very high-tier flippers use the Nautilus and continue to use the Nautilus and will continue to use the Nautilus. I do think it has its place. The Nautilus inherently, just because of the ways that it is designed, does have some tolerance and tuning issues. And also the Zen pins are a little goofy, or Tang pins are a little goofy, but it is just the way that it is. And I think the experience of the Nautilus that's what makes me like it. I like it. It's fun and it's easy. And that's what I like. So, yeah, that's kind of it. I don't know. I really like the Nautilus. I like it a lot more than I thought I would. Getting it again, I was kind of expecting to have it and then just be like, yeah, it's a Nautilus, and then kind of stop flipping it. But I do really like the thing. And it's very, very nice to go back to something that is kind of like, that suits my preferences this well. You know, yeah, it's just very, very nice. So I don't have my Kraken trainer anymore because I gave the blade to someone. I gave the trainer blade to a friend of mine because he needed it for something he was putting together, and I was thinking that I would get my blade back from Atlanta Toxics, so I gave my friend the other blade, and you know how that situation went. So I don't have a Kraken trainer blade, so I don't have a Kraken trainer right now, so I can't really directly compare the two. The 2.5 trainer blade, I should say, because that is really the comparison that I would make because of the balance, and they are kind of similar to each other in terms of style. The V3 is very different. The V3 Kraken trainer is not... It's cool because it offers me something to suggest to people, and I think most people will like it more. But I personally really like the V2.5 blade, or the V2 trainer blade, whatever, you know. The one that has a very strong handle bias and people absolutely despise. Yeah, I like that one. So, yeah, I wish I had a Kraken trainer to directly compare it to, but I don't. Shout out Atlanta Toxics. But yeah, Nautilus is cool. I should probably shut up now. This video is 20 minutes long. Anyways, yeah. Buy what you want. If people tell you your opinion sucks, then they suck. Okay, bye-bye. Peace out.